In many ways, reloading for range or target ammo is really no different from reloading for self-defense ammo. Now in this video, I'm going to be focusing on self-defense pistol ammo. We're going to be talking about the differences between your basic range ammo, considerations for self-defense ammo, do some demonstrations, and discuss some of the important considerations when you trust your life to this. Now let me start by hitting some of the high points and what we might call the importance of proper reloading technique. You know, I've got videos, an entire series of videos, about 15, sometimes 20 minutes a piece, that go through every single step along the process. And I'm going to put a link in the description below and encourage you to take a look at those in-depth extreme reloading videos. But I did want to take a few minutes to highlight some very important steps, and this is very important steps for either range ammo, target ammo, self-defense ammo. And while we're at it, here's something else to think about. The power, the firepower of something like this can be pretty impressive when you take a look at it in the ballistic gelatin and hear all the different stories about pistol ammo and so on. But the reality of it, when we really look at the ballistics, the terminal ballistics, this 9mm Luger Plus P cartridge cannot compare to a rifle round. A lot of folks are very familiar with, comfortable with an AR-15 firing a 5.56 NATO round, and that can be a very, very good self-defense round. However, if you want one gun to become proficient with, both in your house for self-defense as well as enhanced concealed carry or concealed carry when you're out and about, well, the pistol is then the default choice. So, in this video, as I said earlier, I am going to be focusing on pistol rounds and specifically the 9mm Luger. Now, there's a couple of steps, as I said, that we really need to take care of. And one of the first steps, we want to take a look at the cartridge itself. I should say the case itself. We want to make sure that that thing is not dented. It's not, it doesn't have its rim bent. And you should be able to just take a look at that round and determine, is this round reloadable, right? Because oftentimes we pick up brass out at the range, something maybe we just fired, or maybe something that someone else fired. You got to take a very, very close look at it. And one of the inspection steps that can cause a future malfunction is a bent rim where that round needs to extract from. So take a very, very close look at that case while you're doing that initial inspection. And I follow through a very systematic step-by-step process, and if you're interested, you can download this checklist tool or checklist document. I'll put the link to that in the description also. Now, if we boil this all down, the entire reloading process really is two steps. One is case preparation, and there's a lot of sub-steps involved with case preparation. The second major step is the actual reloading process. So let's go through those briefly. As I already alluded to, we are going to need to wipe down, and not just wipe down the case as quickly as possible, but certainly take a look at that case again for any abnormalities, deformations of that case, especially paying attention to the rim. Now, the nice thing about reloading pistol rounds is we don't need to lube these things. We can reload a brass case, we can reload a nickel-plated case. Doesn't matter, neither of those need lube. You will need a sizing die, resizing die, as well as the appropriate shell holder. I have those things right here. This is a full die set by Hornady. RCBS also makes a very, very good set of dies. Other name brands, Redding, so on and so forth. Other ones, Lyman, several of them out there. But the big two, Hornady and RCBS. This is our resizing die. We need to make sure we also have the correct shell holder. You can use a Hornady shell holder, you can use an RCBS shell holder, and you can mix and match. Just because you have a Hornady sizing die does not mean that you have to use a Hornady shell holder. Okay, you could use, and I do use, an RCBS shell holder for my 9mm loads. Once we have resized that case, it will be deprimed. And the next step then, again, following my checklist here, is we're going to do a length test. Now, oftentimes, the 9mm pistol brass in general never grows too long. I don't think I've ever had to trim pistol cases. And if you do have to trim it, maybe something's gone wrong with that case. It's just so rare that you normally do not need to do it. But that case can be too short. Just because it fits into the gauge doesn't mean, okay, everything is just fine. It may actually be too short. And specifically for the 9mm Luger 9x19, be very, very careful that you haven't accidentally picked up and you're trying to reload a 9x18 case, which is for the Makarov. It'll look really, really similar. And in fact, the 380 even looks kind of similar. So make sure you are not trying to reload the wrong case. Take a close look at the case head. And for me, to make sure I'm absolutely certain of what I'm doing, if it doesn't say 9mm Luger, I toss it. You know how easy it is for a little bit older case and a little bit older eyes maybe to misread 9x19 or 9x18, right? So be very, very careful with that. Make sure that your cases meet the correct length. And now we keep going. Another very important step that we jump to in our pistol reloading is where we bell or expand the mouth of the case. Now, we use, in a full die set, you're going to get an expander die. And all that it's going to do is sort of flare out the mouth of that case so you can seat the bullet eventually later in that case. You shouldn't necessarily see, it shouldn't look like a trumpet by the time you finish this. It may be palpable, you may be able to feel it, but you shouldn't really see something like this. That means you have expanded it too much, and you may end up cracking the mouth of that case. So be careful with that step as well. Now, in the case prep process, we're almost done. The next step that we need to do is clean it. I like to clean it very, very well. I use an ultrasonic cleaner with some brass cleaning solution diluted properly, and then that case comes out very well, very nice and clean. Yes, it looks good, so that's an advantage, but it does actually clean it up. And you may want to clean the primer pockets. You don't have to do that necessarily for range ammo, but for self-defense ammo, I will get that primer pocket as absolutely good as I can. I will clean it up with the RCBS case prep station, another case prep, even a hand tool will do a very good job there. Again, we're going to clean it, and when you're taking these things out of that bath, take a look at them. Okay, you're going to dry them off real good. Take a look at them and make sure that you don't now detect some other error that you may not have detected earlier if it was a little bit dirty, a little bit tarnished. Then once they dry, I like to, especially for self-defense ammo, I like to make sure that the primer pockets are correct. They are uniform. And I use a pin gauge to do this. And if this particular pin gauge, which is my no-go gauge, if this particular pin gauge can fit into the primer pocket, that means that the primer pocket has grown too large, and we need to get rid of that case. We need to cull that case out. We dispose of that case. Case prep is finished. Now what we need to do is actually the reloading process, and it always goes like this. We insert a primer, seat the primer with a slight recess in that primer. In other words, the primer is slightly recessed below the head of the case. We then charge that case with powder. I like to use unique powder. You certainly need to use the correct powder for the 9mm Luger and the specific bullet that you're going to be using. And if this is the first thing that you're reloading, first time you're reloading, you need to work up that powder charge. Start at the minimum listed in the manual that you're using. Make sure you use a reliable manual. Lyman does a good job, RCBS, Hornady. The powder manufacturers like Hodgdon also make a very good online and free resource for powder charges. Do not trust, Joe's Lucky Reloading site or something like that for reloading information. I never recommend you do that. I don't care what the load is for. Use a reliable, reputable resource for those minimum and maximum powder charges. Now, don't think you're playing it safe, extra safe, by going below the minimum. That can actually cause you a lot of trouble also. Follow those instructions. Start at the minimum, work up toward the maximum. You don't have to go to the maximum. Your pistol, your gun, firearm, may tell you that is too hot, right? You may have problems with extraction, lots of different problems. The primer is backing out, soot around the primer, big problems, okay? If you see any of those signs, and we detailed those in previous episodes of Extreme Reloading, again, check the description for a link to those videos. You see any of those signs of pressure, back it off. Go to the previous powder charge or even the previous one before that. Okay, so powder charge goes in next, then we top it all off with a bullet. We seat that bullet, and when we are dealing with reloading for a pistol, we need to make sure that we apply a crimp to that case. For rounds like the 9mm Luger, 45 ACP, 380 Auto, these rounds designed for semi-automatic pistols, they need to have a taper crimp applied to them. If we're reloading the 44 Magnum, let's say, designed for a revolver, then we apply a roll crimp to those. The die that you have, for instance, this particular bullet seating die, is designed for 9mm to affect a taper crimp. And it'll do it all in one step, this type of die. I also have, for my 45 ACP, I have a bullet seating die and then a separate taper crimp die. Obviously, we seat the bullet first, then I'll run it through a second time through the taper crimp, and that actually does almost certainly a little bit nicer job in the overall finished product. Because if you're not careful on how you set that bullet seating die that also does the one-step taper crimp all at the same time, if you set it wrong, what will happen is the crimp will start before the bullet actually is fully seated. So to avoid that problem, and it's not a bad idea to do this, especially for self-defense ammo, use a bullet seating die and then run a second separate step for your taper crimp. That is the process. Now don't forget, head out to the range, test out those rounds, test them out. How well can you shoot? Get yourself some training if you're not shooting very, very well. Practice. Some of that training you can watch on the web, either on YouTube or Rumble, etc. You can watch some of those videos and learn from those folks. That's a good way to do it. But you can also certainly take a class And if you're going to do that, make sure you take that class from a person who really does know what they're doing. Now, I'll tell you one more thing before we part, and that is one of the disadvantages of reloading for self-defense. While we can get excellent primers, we can get pretty much any powder that's suitable for the 9mm Luger, 45 ACP, that's not a problem at all. We can get all sorts of bullets, but some of the bullets that will provide the best terminal performance are not available to purchase as a reloading component. In particular, I'm referring to this bullet right here. This is the Corbon Deep Penetrating X bullet, and you cannot buy these bullets to reload, but this is a great bullet. Similarly, the Federal HST, you cannot buy that bullet and reload it yourself. Those are two of the absolute best bullets I have ever tested for terminal performance. We have an entire series called our PAC-T tests where we have tested at this point, I don't know how many dozens of different bullets through our PAC-T testing protocol. You can get some pretty good bullets, though, and reload those. Some to look for are number one, the Speer Gold Dot, good bullet. You can also get and reload for the Sierra or Sig Sauer V-Crown, another pretty darn good bullet. It's not quite as good as the other ones I mentioned, but you can get those and reload for those. Well, I hope I have answered a lot of questions that you may have had. Again, use those resources that I've given you, other websites, as well as the links that I've provided in the description. If you have questions, feel free to post those in the comment section below. I'll try to get back to you on those and answer your questions. Thanks a bunch for watching.